that's what gets my attention. I think that's what gets Chris's attention too, and probably Paulie's. But um, he's physical. He's a good puncher. He's physically strong. He's thick. He can be a force. He has a loss. He does have one loss. Um, the restriction on him for me, or the possible hesitation to put him up. I don't have him in the top two. I have him number three, to be frank.
Welcome into the rankings show here on ProBox TV. What we do, of course, you can tell by the title, is we collectively behind the scenes, we all make a top 5 in a particular weight class. Our producer puts it all together, gives us a consensus 1 through 5, and we discuss it here on air as part of our long-form content. Today is about the middleweight division, one of the most storied weight classes of all time. Names like Carlos Monzon, right? You have Marvin Hagler, you have Bernard Hopkins, but it's a division that has suffered from some anonymity in recent years. We'll discuss that. My experts, of course, joining us via Zoom, Paulie Malignaggi, Chris Algieri, and the coach, Teddy Atlas, Jimmy Smith, alone in studio. Let's start out. Teddy, you always complain I'm going last. I'm starting out with you first for our number 5. Probably the fighter here where maybe in a couple years we're looking at him as number 1, 6'3", 25 years old. It is Hamzah Sheeraz, undefeated, but just starting in his career. What do you think, not just of where he is, but his potential right now?
I would have him higher on the list, number 1. And I saw him in Saudi Arabia up close, as they say, when he won by knockout in that fight. I believe he's 20-0 at this point. He got on my radar. He got my attention. He's tall. He's built like a puncher. He's wiry, and he knows how to box. He can set himself, control range, look to set you up with big shots. He's definitely a big puncher. He's got good reach, good height, knows how to use it. He's only going to get better. I guess that's the best thing to say about him, is that I believe he's only at the beginning of his rise, of where he's going to go, where he can go, as far as his development. So yeah, I have no complaints. If anything, I'd have him a little higher. Some people might say it's a little early. I don't think it's early. He's got a great amateur background. He's shown me that he has the ability to be a top guy.
Chris, when you look at Sheeraz and all that he can do, physical talent just jumps off the screen about this guy. Once again, 6'3", very heavy puncher, real speed. When you look at the raw talent he's starting out with, he's a scary guy, not just now, but the next couple of years, yes?
Yeah, I'm going to follow the sentiments of Teddy Atlas. I agree, Teddy, 100%. I had him higher on my list. I had him at number 3, and I would have him even higher. It's just I think he needs a little more development, more time. We need to see more of what he has to offer. I was very high on Emma Williams. I've called a lot of his fights, and Sheeraz was just a different thing. Yeah. He was too much, and it wasn't just because he was size. It was size and physical and talented. Because guess what? Ammo's got a ton of size and talent and physicality. It was his skill set. He's really good. And Sheeraz, as you said, Teddy, is only going to get better. 20-0, 16 KOs. He's got an incredible frame for the weight class. He's only 25 years old. This guy is a problem. He's a problem right now. And he's going to be a star in this division and maybe the guy that takes over in a couple of years. A little bit more development, a little more maturity. And this guy is going to be the man. And like I said, he might be right now. I don't know. Everyone in this weight class needs to look out for this guy. He is that good. And I'm looking forward to seeing him in these next big fights, because I was so impressed with that Ammo fight, that Ammo Williams fight. Teddy, I think you were there, right? You saw it firsthand.
Yeah, I was.
And Ammo Williams is a very impressive guy, and Sheeraz was able to dismantle him in an incredible fashion and get the stoppage. So, yeah, I agree with you, Teddy. I had him at number 3, and I didn't have him higher just because I needed to see more of him. But yeah, this guy with all the physical gifts and talent, plus the skill set, very, very dangerous.
Now, Paulie, is this one of those guys who can benefit from an era in boxing in which around 20 fights, you can still get those big fights? Don't even need 25, 30 fights. You can get them around 15 to 20 fights. Could be one of those guys who benefits from the current era of boxing to you, Paulie.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's guys that even in the past could have done that. The matchmakers believe in something called developing the fighter for the championship
Right.
level. Because once you get there and you win the title, you're now going to remain at that level and in tough competition. So you want to make sure that the fighter is match made properly on the way up. And even if there is a champion he may be able to beat early, sometimes you don't match him with that guy because then once you win the title, where do you go from there? You got to stay at that level. So that's why it's tricky question when you pose it that way, Jimmy. I think a lot of the Eastern fighters with their tons of amateur experience, turning pro in their mid-20s with these 3, 4, 500 amateur fights, that's a bit different. But I still like the mentality of the westernized fighters who turn pro at 20 years old, even if they got 150, 200 amateur fights. It's just you still want to develop the right way. Now going into Sheeraz, we're gonna go 3 for 3, tic-tac-toe, 3 in a row. I also had him higher. I'm actually gonna make a statement right now because this is the second show in a row where I'm noticing this trend now. The writers are polluting our picks. If we take our average, we have much better picks. Then we end up mixing the writers with our picks and they pollute our picks. Can we just do that? The analysts on ProBox TV, how our average and the writers have their average? Because honestly, I've been saying it for decades. The writers don't know bleep about boxing, and it aggravates me to have this. Sheeraz is much higher. He's a much better fighter. For the fanboys who make their living fanboying it up for credentials, they're gonna adequately rank guys accordingly. It should be a mandate, first of all, that writers should stay in the gym the way they used to back way in the day. All right. If you only show up on fight night, you don't know things like for about the Sheerazes of the world, for example. You know what I'm saying? Where if you would probably be in the gym and see this guy in the gym, not that I have been, but I can already see the goods. I don't need to be in the gym. I've been in the gym for decades. I understand how the gym works. So if you probably see this guy in the gym the way these writers should be, then they probably would have him higher as well, especially in a weight class that is sort of starving for that big name potential. Sheeraz has all the makings of a big name star, big puncher, big frame, action style, and a weight class that's starving for that big name. And I'm the same way with you, champ Chris, where just want to see a little bit higher. I had him at 3. Alimkhanuly and Adames, I only had a little higher than him because obviously they're a bit more battle tested and have the titles. But honestly, this guy could win a title right now. It's just a matter of how you want to match him up. He is very, very dangerous. And Jimmy, you also at the top of the show when you made the point, he could be the future of the weight class if he stays in the weight class.
Well, let's swing it around from a 25-year-old who may have the future in front of him to a man who is only, once again, 5 years, 6 years younger than I am. I have thrown my back out sneezing before. Erislandy, Lara, doing it at 41 years old. Chris, is that way is on our top 5 list? He's a legitimate top 5 160-pounder, but the idea that he's still going at it and still boxing well at his age in this sport, very, very rare.
Yeah, I mean, I had him just at number 5, so just making it into the top 5, but he's still there. He's still here. And I think I said this on other shows. I mean, sometimes he comes out like a bat out of hell, and he's knocking guys out in round 1 or 2 at 160. He's almost like he's found a punch here at 160 pounds or even at 154. As he's moved up, it seems like he's hitting harder. Sometimes he comes out and he blasts guys out in a few rounds, and then sometimes he's the Cuban stylist who takes you 10, 12, takes you deep. But he's still performing really well. At 41 years old, obviously he's lived the life his entire life. He's a Cuban. He knows nothing else but boxing. This is what this guy does. He has cut his teeth in the gym. He lives in the gym. I've been around a lot of Cuban fighters. My friend is Sullivan Barrera, and he lived with me during some of his camps. I mean, the discipline, the level of discipline that man had and that a lot of Cuban fighters possess is why we're still talking about Erislandy Lara at 41 years old, why he's still in the top 5 of this weight class. This weight class isn't that deep, which gives a room for a guy like Lara to still be champion, to still, be able to beat some of these younger guys and to still be relevant. So yeah, I'm okay with where he's at in the list here. He's still a dangerous guy, even at 41 years old.
Now, Paulie, we talk about it sometimes in the industry. We talk about pure boxers, right? And as far as pure boxing goes, which is hit and don't get hit, Erislandy Lara might be one of the best of his generation as far as pure boxers go. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think the whole body of work sort of tells you that. The Cubans, Chris, you mentioned the Cuban boxing style and the Cuban boxers in general. They're not all Cubans are built the same. I mean, you get the Cubans that sometimes stay stuck in Miami and they just party their whole career away. They have this newfound freedom and they ruin themselves when they look so great in the amateurs. And then you have guys like Lara who actually get to Miami, get out of Miami, because that's where the temptation is for a lot of these Cuban guys. He moved to Houston very early on in his pro career and has remained disciplined, has lived a very mature lifestyle, and has kept him relevant to this point, having been a world champion at light middleweight and now even at middleweight at this advanced stage. Now, don't get me wrong. I think he's only a world champion at an advanced stage only because this weight class is, again, a little bit starved of superstar potential or really strong champions. But nonetheless, he's still making where you got to get in where you fit in. And right now, Erislandy, Lara fits in. And I got to also get on myself as well. Just as I was criticizing the writers for having guys all over the place, I had Lara at 4 as well. So they actually fell right into the average here. All right, guys.
With a little redemption, all right, for our writers. Teddy, how difficult is it, as the champ Chris pointed out, Erislandy Lara can be a puncher a lot of times at 160 pounds. He wasn't that early on in his career. Has he changed styles well as he's moved up?
Audrey Moore has the most knockouts in the history of boxing. I think is, I mean, he had close to 200 fights in a different era, an era that will never exist again, when the great fighters fought each other and they fought, they fought
twice a month.
Yeah, they fought. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, Henry Armstrong had over 35 fights in 1 year. I mean, that's a career nowadays. Sometimes 2 careers for some of these guys, the way they fight. So, I mean, Audrey Moore was a mover early in his career. You figure, well, he must have always been a puncher. He wasn't always a puncher. He used to be more of a mover, but he was around into his 40s. As he got older, he couldn't use his legs that much anymore, so he sat down more on his punches. When he sat down more on punches, he found out that he was a prolific knockout puncher. And he started Tommy Hearns in the amateurs. He wasn't really a knockout artist. When he got to the pros, different style. You got to sit down. You got to go more rounds. All of a sudden, prolific puncher. Again, back to Audrey Moore. You got 140 knockouts, something like that, which is incredible feat. If and I'm making a statement that he wasn't that kind of banger early on. It goes to show you how Lara can make an adjustment. Fighters make those adjustments because Lara was, as the champ said, a defensive expert, guy who used his legs, a guy who was, all guile in there, moved his head, real slickster. But then all of a sudden, as you're around a while, you can't move that way as much. So you adapt, or you don't adapt, you retire. You get retired. But he adapted and he started sitting down more. And a guy who's got those kind of defensive, that kind of eye, that kind of vision, that kind of radar to see punches, to make punches miss, guess what? They can become better punchers as they sit down because they're going to catch you clean, because they're doing the hard part. They're making you miss, and they're making available holes that other guys might not make so available. Even though they're better punchers, they might not make them so available. So I'm not shocked that Lara's punching better. Also, Paulie touched on it. The level of opposition, let's be honest, it hasn't been, exactly Godzilla and King Kong with some of the guys that he's been able to knock out a little bit later. But again, a slick guy makes you miss, catches you clean. He's sitting down more. He's thinking more about that, more about offense mixed in there with the defense. So no shock. The shock to you guys might be, and look, he's terrific. I thought he beat Canelo. So, what am I going to tell you? I think he's terrific. The longevity, it speaks to his style. It speaks to what Paulie said. He got away from Miami. He got serious because everything Paulie said, it was 100% right. With the Cubans sometimes. Sometimes, they come from a communist country. They have no rights over there. The only way out is boxing. They get out and they got their newfound freedom. And sometimes it goes a little bonkers. Not everyone, but there have been many. And Lara got away from Miami, got away, as Paulie said, from the distractions. I give him all the credit in the world. His style, his ability to take care of himself, to be consistently serious and committed, diligent with his lifestyle. But I don't have him. I'm making room for the young guys. I just don't think at 41, I got him just outside the 5. And I know that that's, all for what the 2 champs said, which I respect very much. But I got him just outside it, like number 6, because at 41 and he ain't getting no younger, I think, and again, there's no, there's no Superman in that division. But I think the young guys that we've talked about already, and that we're going to talk about in this segment, I think you got to make room for those guys. And I think at this point in their careers, I would probably favor those guys over Lara right now. And that's why I got him just outside the top 5.
Well, Teddy, you talk about Canelo. He definitely beat Paul Williams. Got robbed in that for one of the worst decisions I've ever seen. So this guy, 3 losses, 2 of them debatable for sure. The other one, a split decision loss. Paulie, I want to start with you with our next one. Chris Eubank Jr., where did you put him on your list? 34 years old, doesn't have a whole lot of time to get any of that superstar fight. Was mentioned by Canelo, which to you is never a good thing when it comes to your boxing prowess. What's your thought on Chris Eubank Jr. coming in at number 3?
Eubank Jr. wasn't even on my list. This is one of those guys who's here just because of the name recognition. I think he's just outside the top 5. Don't get me wrong. Again, we talk about the middleweight division not being very deep, and he did perform well in the Smith Liam Smith rematch with Bomac in the corner. But still, a lot to be desired here with Eubank. He sort of showed a certain ceiling, and I don't know if that ceiling really resonates with the upper echelon of any weight class. He can be fun, he can be competitive, but I don't know that he's anything more than a name threat. Like, basically, he can bring money to the table. He's basically going to be a perfect Canelo candidate for an opponent. I'm sorry if I can break it, if I can be frank and basically be honest, bring him up in super middleweight where he has fought at times, and just use him as the next fighter who looks good on paper but really is kind of limited. And I think he's limited even in this weight class. I didn't have him in my top 5. I had him just outside my top 5. But again, going back to now, we got to jump back on the writers. This is a typical guy that the writers would put in the top 5 simply because he's a name guy and they love to, kiss ass for accreditations to the fights. They make sure they, kiss the right asses too. So this guy, I don't really see him, especially at 3. I mean, that's pretty wild. He's solid. He can be in these fights, but I don't see him winning past a certain level, which means I don't think he's a real threat to the titles. To the major world titles anyway. He can be in the fights. He can make it fun. He can make it promotable. I think he's got some charisma to him as well. He's kind of interesting on the mic as well in his own way. Can fight to a degree, but he's never going to be a major world champion that I can see, even in a weight class like this where it's pretty open.
Chris, is it about privilege? He's the son of a British boxing legend. As Paulie said, puts butts in seats in the UK, is good on the mic, but the overall skill set, does he deserve to be at number 3?
No, I mean, I don't think so either. Number 3 is way too high for me. He's 34 years old and he's been very inactive. But listen, he's talented. He's an athletic guy and he can punch. And up until that Liam Beefy Smith fight, he's actually been very durable in the past. All
right. He's talented. Let's leave it at that. He's talented.
I was waiting for it. He's a talented guy for sure. But at 34 years old, I feel like he's reached his ceiling, and I don't think he wins another world title, even in this weight class, which is pretty sparse. And I agree with you, Paulie. I think this is a perfect opponent for Canelo Alvarez in the twilight of his own career. But in terms of him being at number 3, that's a little high for me. I still have it in the top 5 because I do think he's talented. I do think his athleticism and his size, for the weight class is formidable. He's fought at 68. He's fought at world class at 168. And now him at 160, he's a big 60 pounder. And with that kind of athleticism and hand speed, he is a formidable guy to deal with. Is he going to be able to beat a guy like Carlos Adames or Alimkhanuly? I don't think so. Is he going to be able to beat even a guy like Sheeraz? Probably, I don't know. Probably not. I do think he can beat a guy like Lara based on just physical size and age, which is why I had him in my top 5. But yeah, having him this close, in the top 3, bit much for me. But nonetheless, I do think for the reasons I mentioned, he is formidable, big for the weight class, athletic, quick hands, and has shown to be durable, except for that Liam Beefy Smith first fight.
Teddy, he has a fight coming up October 12th in Saudi Arabia. Does he need a great performance to kind of lure that big name, fighting a Polish fighter who's a contender, but doesn't have a big name on the docket? Does he need a great performance in October to get that big name? Once again, 34 years old. What's your thought on his next fight?
Yeah, no, it wouldn't hurt. Yeah, for the same reason we're talking about. Yeah, I think everyone needs to keep winning, especially in a division that's this tight. and that is just starving for attention and spotlight. Yeah, very important, very important. But what they both, what Paulie and Chris both touched on, I mean, one is of course the father's name, but the other thing is the popularity of English fighters if they go over. We can say all we want to the cows come home about and I don't have him in the top 5, by the way, but we could just outside again. But we could talk all day long about, how he don't fit in there in our top 5, and he goes over to London and he's going to fill a stadium because of his name and because of the London fans. I mean, they're probably the greatest boxing fans in the world. I know the Mexican fans, and there's so many great fans, the Puerto Rican fans, obviously. There's so many that are great, but it would be hard to find fans that are more loyal, more durable than the English fans. I mean, they're going to put 100,000 people in freaking Wembley Stadium to see Dubois and Joshua. And a lot of people, I know more people know Joshua, but a lot of people don't know Dubois. But yet, it fits 90,000. I think they're trying to figure out a way to put another 10,000 in because of the demand for it. So you have to attach the geography to it, that because he comes from there, because he will sell over there, no matter what, you have to be cognizant of his name just for that. And he is talented. Like Chris said, obviously he is talented. He got caught, he got knocked out by Liam Smith. Nobody, that was a bit of a shocker. He came back very nicely, boxed the way he needed to box to win the rematch and to dominate the rematch. But I don't have him there. I think that he is a guy that, and it happens sometimes, but he is a guy that's attached to his geography, to his fan base, and he will always be, important in that kind of way in the conversation of boxing, with this division because of that attraction when he goes across the pond.
Chris, it's a phrase we've been using a lot, which is talented and athletic. What I'm curious about is, what do you feel the talent level is for number 2? That's right, Carlos Adames, who has rattled off 6 in a row since the first loss of his career against Teixeira. What are your thoughts on him and his placement here at number 2?
This guy's a beast. I like Carlos Adames a lot. I've seen him. I remember watching him at 147, which is crazy. I remember he was trying to cut weight for a fight. He was fighting at one of the WBA conventions in Colombia, and I got pulled into the weight room to be like, hey, we got this guy who's trying to make 147, and he was a couple pounds off, and I'm looking at him, and I'm looking at what they're doing. I'm like, he's not making 147, guys. He's a monster. He was huge. It was crazy that he was ever trying to make 147. Now he's fighting at 160. He's been doing some really good work. That fight against Erislandy was super impressive. I think that was really a graduation for him to going into the world-class level. Now, I mean, he easily could be the best guy in this division. He could be the guy. I actually had him at number 1. I'll talk more about that once we talked about number 1 in terms of who's going to be there. But I'm a big fan of Carlos Adames. I like the way he fights. I like how physical he is. I like his skill set. And I think he has a lot of momentum, and he's got the right mindset, to be a good fighter, be a great fighter. And he just needs the fights. And I'll tell you this right now, he's ready to fight everybody. He wants to fight everybody. That's the kind of guy that he is. I know the people that are around him. I like Carlos Adames. I think he's a pit bull out there. And in terms of his skill sets, I think he's got that as well. So this is one of those guys who, because the weight class is a bit weak, has the ability to take over this weight class. Even though, we're speaking about some of the top guys that are around. I'm backing Carlos Adames to be a guy who's going to be at the top of this division.
Paul, are you buying or selling what the champ Chris Algier is saying about the potential and where he should be right now at number 2? Adames, what do you think?
What's funny? Again, we are on the same page. I had Adames at 2, but I was really, really telling myself, I think head-to-head he beats Alimkhanuly. Alimkhanuly's resume is a little bit better, so I put him at 1. But head-to-head, I really have a feeling that I would see Adames winning that fight. Alimkhanuly, as far as Eastern fighters are concerned, yeah, he's the best fighter in this weight class for me, due to the resume and unified champion and all this stuff. but he's not that impressive overall in terms of when you compare him to other Eastern fighters. There's a little bit to be desired there. And you know, we'll see. I mean, right? I feel like Adames is 2. If he would get the head-to-head with Alimkhanuly, I probably would pick him to win that fight. But I would love to see it. It would give some spark to this weight class.
Teddy, what's your thought on the physical talent of Carlos Adames? Do you think he could be number 1? That guy, as we've been saying, in the middleweight division, could it be Adames?
Well, you used the right word to ask the question. You really did. Physical.
Yeah.
Because that's what gets my attention. I think that's what gets Chris's attention too, and probably Paulie's. But he's physical. He's a good puncher. He's physically strong. He's thick. He can be a force. He has a loss. He does have one loss. The restriction on him for me, or the possible, hesitation to put him up. I don't have him in the top 2. I have him number 3, to be frank. I have him out of there. But I got him knocking at the door, just like the champs do. The thing for me is that styles. With the, as soon as I say physicality, that he imposes his physicality, he'll try to impose his will on you. He's a good puncher, he goes to the body. He's technically good. He's a good, he knows how to fight. He's a damn good fighter. But as soon as I use that word, and I jumped on it after you introduced him with that word, Jim, styles have to come into place. Because a guy who fights that way, a style of a certain guy, someone who we might not have as high, we might not, be having them, at the top of the list, but their style can give that kind of physical style trouble. A guy who can box, a guy who can move, a guy who can control the outside, a guy who can give angles, a guy who can stink the place out. Maybe I'm touching on that just a little bit, but that kind of guy can sometimes give just put the be the fly in the ointment for a guy who looks to get to you and looks so great when you look at him. He's that car in the car lot that you just say, yeah, give me that car. I mean, that's him. That's what he looks like. But when you start getting down to the parts that I get down to when I look at under a microscope of being a little one-dimensional in that physical style, category, I think he could be a little vulnerable to a guy with a jab, a guy on the outside, a guy with the long arms, a couple of the guys that we have in this division, quite frankly. So that's why, and obviously it's not a demeaning thing for him to be number 3 on my list, but that's why I don't have him 201.
Now, number 1 on our list, his name has been brought up a couple times by you, Paulie, so I'm going to start with you. Janibek Alimkhanuly, 15-0, 10 knockouts, has that storied amateur career that you're always talking about, Paulie, of these Eastern European fighters. He's from Kazakhstan. Does he fit in that mold? You said he's a little different. Does he fit in the mold of the other great Eastern European fighters that have made a pro transition late, or is he a little bit different? What's your thought?
Well, I tell you what, he's unified champion, so he's done. He's got the resume to give him the expectation, right? But this is still, again, a weight class that has been a little bit lacking. I do think Alimkhanuly is a little less dominant stylistically than certain other Eastern Europeans that you see just come on the scene and they just wow you. They're just, even guys like Madrimov, who is now not a champion in 154 because he's in a very tough weight class. I think, I would choose Madrimov to be better than Alimkhanuly, for example, but Alimkhanuly's solid. He's good. Teddy makes a lot of great points here, because if I look at just based on what I think, yeah, Sheeraz and Adames, I think I would pick to beat Alimkhanuly, both of them, but then I think Sheeraz is going to be the guy none of the champions want to fight, because he's the guy, he's the monster in the weight class where you're still trying to build a name and you're trying to, become the guy, because nobody really is the guy. You got to start by at least keeping your belt. So a guy like Sheeraz is capable of not knocking off all these guys and then taking it away. So, Sheeraz could be just, frankly, a number 1 guy once you get to see him. And we talked about that when we mentioned him. But nonetheless, Alimkhanuly's solid. Listen, he's got the resume. You brought it all up, Jimmy. but there's something about him. It just doesn't click together the way it does for a lot of Eastern. You know, I'm big on Eastern Europeans, man.
Yeah.
You know, and their resume speaks for themselves. Even in the recent Olympics, Uzbekistan won 5 Olympic gold medals. Again, but it's not just the Uzbeks. You got Kazakhs, you got Russians, Ukrainians. You know, the whole former Soviet bloc brings out amazing fighters. You know, but you know, I think Alimkhanuly's beatable. He didn't make weight last time as well, right? So there's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of question marks about him. I don't know how much longer he's going to last there, either with the weight or even if he takes on a top opponent. I don't know what Top Rank is going to do with him. Let's see, because some of the opponents he's also been matched with are kind of lacking in excitement value as well. You know, like like that guy was a Butler, the Canadian guy. You know, I don't really want to see guys like that in title fights. Let's see how this weight class in itself moves around, especially a guy like Alimkhanuly, who is a lot of people's number one. But in my opinion, even if he's my number one, he's very, very, very beatable.
Chris, let's talk about that. The fact that his career has been a little bit snake bit recently. Hasn't fought since October, as Paulie said. Got sick during the weigh-in his last time out. This idea that he's kind of snake bit along with 160 pounds. What's your thought on that?
I don't think he's snake bitten. I wouldn't call it that. You know, and Champ, you said there's something off, right? There's something that doesn't add up with him. I'll show you what it is. Listen, I would call a bunch of his fights in the bubble for Top Rank when he was coming up, and I was blown away. He looked fantastic. And lately, he's looked flat. And then last fight, he doesn't make weight and gets sick. So something's changed. Something's flipped. Either he has outgrown the weight class and he's been killing himself to make the weight. That's why he's giving flat performances. Or lifestyle discipline has gone out the window. He spent too much time here and something's off. Because if he looks flat in these fights that he's supposed to dominate and doesn't, okay, all right, you can give a pass here, a pass there. Then you don't make weight. Wait a second. What's going on here? Something's up. You get sick making weight at this level when you're a world champion defending your title against a guy you're absolutely going to beat. Something's up. And it's either a discipline problem or he's outgrowing the weight class, which is why I did not have him at number 1, because I think Carlos Adames beats him, like you said, head to head. But 2, I don't know if he's going to fight in this weight class again.
Is it a thing too where he's maybe staying at the weight class because he's got these belts and he doesn't want to vacate them?
Yeah, it could be, but it doesn't matter. In terms of this discussion here, if he can't make this weight, if it's hurting him to make the weight, he doesn't beat these other guys either. He doesn't beat Carlos Adames if he's struggling to make weight. If he can't make the weight, then he's out of the top 5 altogether. And now there's a vacuum, and those 2 of those belts are gonna go vacant. So the weight issue for me really made me have to think, because listen, when I saw him at his best, when he was calling those fights coming up, I was like, this is the guy. If you have 2 eyes, you can see this guy can fight. But recently, he's left a lot to be desired. And I don't know if it's because of the weight, because of him having trouble. I don't know if it's because of his lifestyle and his discipline have changed. But regardless, I that's why I rated Carlos Adames so high. I gave him respect at number 2 because he is a two belt holder in this weight class, and obviously is very good. But again, I don't know how much time he's going to be spending at this weight class.
Yeah, you're making the wheels in my head turn, as you typically do when you make some of these comments. He's looking susceptible, smaller, going up in weight, question marks about how good he can be. Even if he has built up his name, he's probably the premier name at 160. Enough susceptibilities. Prime Canelo opponent candidate. Prime Canelo opponent. Boom.
Teddy, as a coach, you've seen this a million times. At 160 pounds, the all-time greats, let's say B-Hop, Hagler, they were incredibly disciplined. These guys were gym monsters. Hagler called it going to jail when he went into training. That discipline at the top, do you think Alimkhanuly has it, and how important is it?
I have no idea. I don't know his lifestyle. I don't know his habits. Usually from that part of the world, when you come from that part of the world, you usually have discipline. You're usually strong-minded. You know, you're not spoiled. That's for sure. You haven't had the advantages, having a lot given to you. You've had to do it the hard way. So that would kind of fly in the face of most guys that come from that part of the world, as far as the discipline that they usually bring with them. The thing for me, Chris made some really outstanding points, and of course, you know, they always make those points, him and Paulie, but the weight, he's huge. I mean, the first time I saw him, a couple things stood out. How big he was how strong he was and how his length. He had the length and he knew how to use the length. Although there was one other thing that stood out too to me too, especially recently. And look, some of what I'm about to say could be influenced by what both champions just touched on brilliantly about his habits, about, maybe outgrowing the weight class. I don't know. So I'm not going to go anywhere where I don't know. But what I do know is I noticed you can hit him. You can hit him. And when I noticed that, and look, he perseveres. He winds up getting to the guy. He's a good puncher. He's a good finisher. He puts punches together really well. But even though he's got all the physical assets of size, of length, of physicality, he lets you get in close enough to pin him on the ropes, catch him going backwards, and nail him with clean shots. And he's survived it. He's shown the heart of a champion. He's been able to do that. But that's the thing that really stood out to me. You can hit him. This is for Paulie, of course. Like from the Predator. From the Predator. If he bleeds, we can kill him.
Yeah.
He bleeds.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
Great 80s line. Gentlemen, I got to ask before we go, you guys talked about the top 5. Who is outside of it that you would put in your top 5 list that we didn't mention today? Chris, you go first.
So I didn't mention Jamal Charlo. Which one was? I get confused. I'm sorry, guys. The Jamal Charlo.
Yes.
I didn't mention Jamal Charlo because I don't think he's actually going to be at 54 anymore. Jumping up 2 weight classes, fighting Canelo, getting that Canelo money at his age to go back down to 154. I think that's a bridge too far. I think we get back down. I'm confusing them again. Let me start over. These twins always mess me up.
He's fought twice in 4 years, the one you're thinking of, 34 years old, right? Yep.
Right. I confuse him with Jamel, the 54-pounder. Jamal, I do not believe is going to fight at 160 once again. I think he's off the reservation in terms of getting back to his boxing career. I'm not going to have him in the weight class. Trying to think who else is around. Shane Mosley Jr. just had a good win. He beat Daniel Jacobs over at 168. And really, he was going up in weight. Didn't need to. Went up to fight Danny just because of the opportunity. But he is actually a viable guy at 160. He's a guy who's been improving. He's growing into the weight class, growing into himself, growing into his career, I should say, not the weight class. He's been developing and is turning out to be a guy that actually could be there, could vie for some of these top spots. So does he become champion at 160? Maybe, probably not, but it's possible he could. But he's always in good fights. He has a good chin. He's never been stopped. So he's a viable guy as well. Trying to think who else.
Nursultanov, undefeated.
Who else you got?
Nursultanov, undefeated, 20-0.
I haven't seen enough of him, and I haven't seen a name opponent. He went 10 rounds of Coceres, the tough Argentinian guy who's essentially a gatekeeper for guys coming up at this point. So I have to see him with better competition. Like we talked about Sheeraz. Like Sheeraz is a young guy. We've really only seen him against Amma Williams, but he fought Amma Williams and he knocked him out. So I need to see you perform at a high level before I can really talk about you in a top 5 of any weight class, even a thin one like this.
Paulie, what's your thought? Who missed that top 5 you think might be on the bubble or deserves that top 5 mention?
Yeah, my guy was Nursultanov. I had him at 5. I had Eubank at 6. So I mean, we didn't have Nursultanov in this top 5. Charlo also was another interesting one, champ, that you brought up. I just think Charlo's best days are behind him. I don't even know if he's hungry. Nursultanov is a guy who is hungry. Yes, we need to see him at a higher level. But I like what I've seen with him in the videos I've seen of him. He holds position very well. He's not the most talented guy, but he has a great understanding of position and fundamentals as well. Can mentally pressure you. Likes to get in there and fighting and have a tussle. And again, fundamentally sound, mentally strong. I feel like, even him, it was between him and Eubank. And when I kind of analyzed their boxing styles, I was like, I feel like Nursultanov may be able to beat a Eubank, So I put Nursultanov as my number 5. He's missed our top 5 overall, but I think he's definitely a guy to watch as well here in this weight class.
Teddy, your top 5. Who did we not talk about you think deserves a mention?
Well, of course, you put me last again. Thanks, Jim.
You love me for it. Go ahead.
No, it's good. I love you too. This way I can just piggyback off of Paulie, the brilliant Paulie. Miriam Nursultanov, I had him on there. I had him in a pretty good spot in my top 5. So he was missing for me. He should be in there, I believe. And I also have Andre Mikohalovic. I have him right on the outskirts. I have him ready. You know, he's been on the floor. He's 21-0. He's been on the floor one time, which made you think. But the way he responded, you know, the old timers would always say that's the making of a champion. Guy gets off the floor, he wins against good competition. He comes back and he wins in a dominant way. He won in a dominant way. He came back. He's an exciting guy. He's an all-out offensive fighter. I would have him in there, and then you got to give some consideration. If he's still in a fight game, I don't know if he's still in a boxing game, but if Charlo, the undefeated Charlo, is still in the, and I'm not even going to try to say the name. That's where I thank you for letting me go last, because I learned from Chris. I'm not even going to mess with those twin names. That's one good thing.
Jamal
Charlo.
Yeah, exactly. There he is. Thank you, Chris. It's if he's still in the fight business, mentally, physically, I don't know if he is. What, he's fought twice in the last 4 years? I don't even know what it is. But if he is, I have to consider him a guy that would still fit in there. So those are my guys.
Well, we've broken it down for you. The top 5 at 160 pounds. Storied weight class. Well, I got storied talent to talk about it. We'll see you Monday. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the fights. We'll rank them yet again next time.
Wednesday Night Fights.
Dynamite action on Wednesday Night Fights every other Wednesday on your boxing channel.
Coming up on your next Wednesday Night Fights, September 11th. Rising Guatemalan star Lester Martinez puts his O on the line against fellow undefeated warrior Joe Sean Time James. Live from the ProBox Event Center in Plant City. Get your tickets at proboxtv.com or take your chances at the door. Wednesday Night Fights.
For more ProBox TV, scan the QR code on the screen or go to the App Store and Google Play. ProBox TV, your boxing channel.